Welcome to Unstuckish, the podcast about getting free from burnout and stepping into a life that actually lights you up. I'm your host, Laura Cardwell, and around here, we believe transformation isn't about quick fixes or hustle hacks. It's about rewiring your brain, reclaiming your energy, and remembering who you really are. Each episode will dive into the science of the nervous system, the wisdom of human design, and the messy magic of human potential. You'll get real talk, practical tools, and a little soulful woo, all designed to help you find more joy, purpose, and freedom without pretending it's perfect. Because let's be honest, getting unstuck is rarely a straight line, but with curiosity, compassion, and a little play, we can make the journey a whole lot lighter. Hello, y'all, and welcome back. It's been a little bit, and so I am sorry about that, but the holidays, and then I got sick and all of the things, and now it's almost February, and that's just what happens. So I want to talk a little bit about what is really coming up right now. And it's actually going to be reinforced by many of the gates we're going to transit through in the month of February. And that is really the skill around self-regulation and what we mean by self-regulation. And that really self-regulation is the root of leadership. And most of us were never taught how to self-regulate. We were taught to be productive. We were taught to be positive. We were taught to be pleasing. We were taught to be strong. But we were not necessarily taught how to be with our emotions, how to be emotional, how to regulate our emotions without collapsing into them, without falling into them or outsourcing them. So when we think about leadership, we might think of words like control, dominance, certainty. Definitely leadership has been simultaneous with the idea of power over, right? Force in some kind of way. Or that you're in charge of. If we think of people that are entitled, like in roles that have titles in leadership, there's a hierarchy to that. And that hierarchy comes with deep responsibility. And when that gets out of balance, when that isn't regulated appropriately, when it isn't understood completely, then what we see is what we're seeing all around the world in leadership right now, which is people's core wounds running the show, right? And so the new definition of leadership is really about coherence. It's about emotional steadiness. It's about nervous system safety, and self-regulation is not emotional suppression, right? It's the ability to stay present with our sensations and our feelings and our emotions without needing to escape them, without needing to attack someone else, without needing to numb out around them. And it's kind of like this is a critical mass of why emotional intelligence is no longer optional. It's literally how we shape our reality. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, like this whole idea is really about the emotional solar plexus and human design, and we'll come back to that in just a minute, but it really does shape everything, right? And so but first let's talk about dysregulation. Now, I've done an episode on nervous system regulation and what it is, but in this sense, let's talk about the neurology of like abandonment, of trauma, and how it kind of sets this low level bar of anxiety, this fear of separation, kind of this low level fear of being abandoned, or when we get stuck in that kind of trauma, when we experience abandonment or that emotional unpredictability early in our lives, then the nervous system learns that like kind of one core lesson, and that is I'm not safe unless something outside me stabilizes me. And that is because the amygdala who is the sentinel of fight or flight, becomes kind of hypervigilant. And the vagus nerve stays in a low grade fight or flight or freeze. and cortisol levels become kind of baseline. So the brain forms these predictive models based on threat. So instead of I feel something and I soothe myself, we learn other things regulate me. People regulate me. Relationships regulate me. Money regulates me. Work regulates me. Approval regulates me. And this creates low level chronic anxiousness. Not necessarily panic or what we think about, like not crisis, but just kind of this constant hum of something is off. So when we get into midlife, we get these disruptions, right? Because as we get into midlife, we start to several things start to happen. Well, one, midlife, let's just name midlife because I was recently having a conversation with someone and I was talking about working with women in midlife and and cougardy, which is your cougar puberty. And and she said, "Oh, it sounds like you're talking to an audience that's older than me." And I was like, "Well, that's interesting. How old do you think I'm talking to?" And she said, "I don't know, like older than me. May, like." And so and she's in her early 40s or mid 40s. And I was like, "Oh, interesting. It's so true. Like we just don't really think of midlife as being our 40s, right? Because I think as we age, we hear people say that. Like I've heard my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and my mom say that. I don't feel this age. And I'm starting to be old enough. I'm 49 now. I'm starting to be old enough to experience that same thing. Like I don't actually feel this old. And um, so I didn't really think of myself as midlife either, but I'm going to be clear in my work and in this body of work that's been coming through and in the new book that I'm working on and the things I'm starting to share with you, I'm talking about midlife really starting around 35. Um, and then I'm talking about it until about 60. And the reason why I'm framing it in that age frame is because that we go through this series of initiations. We go through these series of actually they happen through astrological transits that we go through, and we look at the human design chart. There's this serious intensity that happens at midlife that's really calling us to start to look at this stuff, to look at who am I? Who am I here to be? What is my deeper purpose? What is the story I'm here to tell? What's the legacy I'm here to leave? Where am I in power? Where am I meant to lead? We are all leaders in some kind of way. And so when we have this kind of low level disruption to our nervous system because of attachment issues or abandonment issues that might be coming from childhood or where we haven't healed the story arc of the narcissism that is childhood. Now, I'm not saying like everyone is narcissistic as a child. I'm just saying that kind of that inability to see it from a different perspective is part of what we're doing for the first 30 years of our lives. We are learning who we are really until we're about 21 where we're who we're told we are, and then our 20s and our 30s we really question like is that who I am. And so we're kind of breaking that conditioned filter of who we've been told that we are. And then we get into midlife and we have these disruptions. And look, like I just want to be really clear and I'll do whole episodes on it. But like as we get into perimenopause, that is puberty all over again, only with throat punches and wine, right? So so midlife brings all of these disruptions, right? So we've got these astrological things that are starting to happen. They're shifting, they're bringing old pain back to the surface to say, where am I with this? What is this emotional wound that's asking me to heal it? Where have I had a filter that's very closed and self-centered? And I'm being asked to look at something from a much bigger perspective, or I'm being asked to look at my wounds and look at my hurts and look at the deeper thing. And I'm going to talk about some of that with metal energy in just a minute. But we got that going on. We got that going for us. We got that going for us. And then we've got this, like, on top of that, we've got all of these hormone changes, and our brain is changing, and we are less able to regulate our emotions. And we also, a lot of us have this kind of, because of the mood instability, because of this destabilizing of the neural pathways, we get this kind of extra low grade anxiety. And often it's one of the first signs of perimenopause is this kind of mood, this rage, right? There's this rage that you're like, suddenly they're like, who am I? I do not even know myself anymore. So we get these hormone changes, we get these neural changes, we get these identity shifts, and we're like, oh my God. And those old coping mechanisms, those old coping strategies, they stop working. And our system starts to say things like, you can't outsource regulation anymore. It won't work for you anymore. And it brings in this kind of deeper question about, like, what am I here to heal? So that's what we've got, all these disruptions that are starting to come up. These, like, what is here for me to heal? And what do I need to look at? That's this deeper story I've been telling myself. And so as we move into February, we actually, the first gate that will transit, and if you watch Instagram, I will try and make sure I have gate videos up for all the gates that we go through, because it's really the month of emotional regulation. And I want to talk about why. Um, but the first one is actually in the G center. It's in the heart, and it's really about narrative. It's about, like, the story that I'm telling myself, and this, and the way I remember myself, and who I think I am, and the filters that I have put in place for the way I see the world. And so let's talk about metal energy for a minute, because it's, um, we're working with some metal, and we're not in the metal season. Metal season happens to coincide with the fall, but in this case, what we're looking at is the how metal governs, where the story that we've told, or the story that we've embodied from other people, becomes core beliefs. It becomes attitudes, and it becomes the way, when we have core beliefs and attitudes, they literally become filters of perception. And we know that the way we perceive things, the filter that our eyes look through, is it governs the way that the neurology functions, the way that we think. And then what's happening with neurology, and the energy that's passed, and the hormones that are produced, and the neurotransmitters that are produced, it creates the chemistry of the body, which signals sensations and feelings in the body, and it moves that energy around. Those are emotions. So we know that these filters, the filters of our perception, are directly related to how we think, feel, and emote. And so we get these, like, crystallized thought forms. When a thought form, it goes unquestioned our whole life, we just look through it the way it is, and we don't question it at all. It becomes this kind of core belief. And so when we are looking at this first gate of February, it's about beginning to question the narrative, beginning to look at where I have unhealed wounds that are ready to be looked at. And that is a lot of what midlife starts to bring up for us, starting with our first Saturn return, which actually happens at the end of our 20s. But then late 30s, we start this series of initiations that really ask us to look and start to look at this story. And so we kick off the month kind of talking about the story that we've embodied, that other people gave us, what's true for us, what's ready to be let go of, what are those core beliefs that we've set in place from them, and are we ready to shift them? Are we ready to let them be released out of our nervous system as this kind of low grade? And are we ready to heal? Like, I say that story arc of narcissism. It's like we need to, like, write the story of who we were, and so that we can look at it, like the ability to kind of get meta and look back at it without getting swept up in the story. That's also part of the gates that we will navigate as we go through February. It's like not getting swept up in our story. So now we're back to what is self-regulation really, right? And so self-regulation is our ability to know ourselves deeply, and to find that place in us. And so in Richard Schwartz work, which is called Internal Family Systems, he says you have your true self, right? Which is, you're in your true self when you're really in your 8 C's. And I never can name them all, so this is always a fun game. But it's like when you're calm and confident and creative and curious and compassionate and confident, and, oh my God, too, did I say courageous? I don't know what I said already, but you get the point. The 8 C's, and you can look it up. And so self-regulation is really about, like, that's who you truly are. And you're in that when you feel this kind of sense of peace and harmony inside, and you have this warmth in you it brings in the fire energy of, not fire that is like burning things down or is passion unchecked, which is also one of the gates we kind of look at, is like, how do we make the warm embers of a fire that crackles softly, that continues to burn, doesn't burn low, doesn't burn us out, doesn't, rage, right? So it's like we've got this warm fire energy that we can lean into, that we can go find in ourself, and in the self we can then look at, be with, make space for, listen to all of our little parts, all of our parts of us that have these old stories, that have been a victim to something, that have been abandoned or rejected, or all of those fears that create those core beliefs. We can go to the center of our heart, and we can use the energy of our true self to help regulate our own nervous system. And it's really a skill that we just don't get taught. We actually learn pretty early that we need to co-regulate. And then if you're of my generation and above, we were not, like my generation talks about emotions. We're not necessarily really great about fully regulating them yet. We're a bit of a bridge. Like, we're willing to talk about it, but we don't always know how to do the work. But the generations before us, there's a lot of stigma around emotion, about talking about how you feel. There was a lot of like not expressing, and that it wasn't safe to express emotions, and it wasn't safe to be emotional. And so the way that you dealt with emotions is just to suppress them, not show them. And the younger generations, millennials and younger, that are like, they talk about it, and they talk about it on TikTok, and they talk about it on Instagram, and they talk about it, right? They're not afraid to talk about how they're feeling. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And across the board in all of it, it's not just talking about it either. It's learning to regulate it, right? So we're still learning the skills of what that means to regulate, to self-regulate, right? Which I'm trying to describe with lots of words. So self-regulation then becomes my ability to understand my anxiety, to understand my depression, to understand my anger, and to understand all of my feelings and emotions, and to understand the stories in which they're attached to, the wounds that they're attached to, the protectors that are there, the behaviors that we have that are protecting those little wounds, and how those behaviors show up in relationship, and how we are calibrating ourselves to these old stories. And we start to go in midlife, we start to go through these transitions that say, you got to look at these things. You have to find what center is, know who you truly are. Who you are is an infinite being of love and light having a human experience. You're your true self, as we just said, and that you've had this human experience, and for good or for bad, right? Like that, but can you create emotional neutrality around it by being able, like, that's what a lot of energy medicine and vibrational medicines are trying to help you do, is not to undo a memory or to pretend like it never happened, but to create emotional neutrality so that you can look at it with curiosity and not get swept up in the emotion of it. So that ability to rewrite a story, to create emotional neutrality around a story and heal some of those wounds, and so that we're not looking for someone else to create safety for us, right? So self-regulation is, I am safe. I know I'm safe. And I know I'm safe because I am an infinite being of love and light having a human experience. And I am always connected to source. I cannot be disconnected from that. And that is the only true place that there is safety, is in knowing source. And then from that place, understanding that there's going to be emotional disruption between you and other humans and the world around you, because it's going to, like, that's to be a human, is to have those experiences. But those people do not need to act differently unless there's deep, I mean, I'm not saying that we condone emotions running wild and people being bullies and people hurting people, right? There is a line. But in general, the idea here is the meta picture. So let's get in the meta picture first, is like, my safety isn't dependent on you. I don't need you to talk to me in a certain way or not, in order to feel safe. I need you to talk to me in a certain way or not because of boundaries and values and the way that and integrity, and the way that we want to love and support each other because that's what we're meant to do, but not because I need you to do that so that I can feel safe. We've got to learn how to find safety in our own nervous system first. And that's what some of the gates that are being highlighted this month are really about. It's like, where are you outsourcing safety? You're waiting for someone else to act differently or say something differently so that you can feel safe, versus healing what needs to heal so that you can feel safe regardless of what someone says to you. And then from that place, you can create value-based boundaries and stay in integrity. And then we think about what's the best for the whole. Then we have the bandwidth when we're healing our own wounds. Then we have the bandwidth to hold space for people that aren't quite there yet, right? So in relationship, that can look like one person being very triggered in a conversation and the other person able to stay centered and just hold space while the other person is dysregulated for a minute without being pulled into dysregulation themselves. And then having the conversation from a place of integrity and alignment, rather than reactivity, right? So, okay. So in human design, when we talk about the emotional solar plexus, this is all what we're talking about, these gates all point to this kind of self-regulation and the ability to self-regulate through understanding your truth. And your truth is that you're an infinite being that lives, that there is a part of you that is source energy, right? That's the same source energy that runs me, that runs every other human, that runs every tree, that runs every bird, that is the mycelium that connects everything, right? So it's all the same source energy. We're all part of that source energy. And this center is teaching us how to trust that, right? So we will transit a gate that is really about faith, and faith is really is about the energy of trusting that we are source, that we are source, that we are seen and loved and provided for. And it is that trust that creates emotional safety or nervous system safety and emotional regulation. And then we move from that. So if we look at this center in human design and how it is meant to, how if we calibrate ourselves to that, if we try and hold our emotional vibration around the idea that I am source first and I know how to regulate my nervous system and I know how to sit in emotional discomfort and not get dysregulated because I know I am source, then we actually send that signal back up into the heart center, the G center, we call it in human design. And we the G center actually has a magnetic monopole. That's we can look at the physics of that. We don't have to do that right now, but we literally have this attractor pole in the heart. And what's happening there is that we're attracting experiences that show us what the calibration of the heart looks like. And so as we are starting to get into midlife and heal these wounds and look at these things, then we're attracting maybe crunchy opportunities for us to sit in and say, oh, wait, this is an opportunity for me to choose to do something different. This is a way for me to see that I have this story so that I can start to switch it. It's not about being punished by the universe um, or that you're not good enough if your life isn't great, that you haven't done enough affirmations, kind of some of the gaslighting that goes on in the new thought and spiritual community and coaching communities is like, if you're doing it right, you should be driving Porsches and having the first parking spot that you want every time. And that's not how it works, right? Often what's going on in the heart is it's attracting an opportunity for you to grow. And we grow through tension, and we grow through pain, and we grow through grief, and we grow when things are challenging, right? Just like a muscle grows when we push it a little beyond its limits, right? So we're meant to have these kind of crunchy opportunities. We're having a global crunchy opportunity right now. And I would say it's much more than crunchy. We are really looking at what fear does. And we are really looking at what happens when the wounds of our childhood aren't healed and we become leaders that don't know how to self-regulate. And we believe that leadership is control and manipulation versus being in harmony and supportive, right? So now we're at a place where we're saying my heart is part of I've calibrated my heart to attract these experiences, to create a little tension in my relationships, to create a little tension at my job. And then I've got these astrological things that are happening that are kind of amplifying that. And then I've got these hormones that are like not giving me the kind of old crutches that I used to lean on. And it forces us to look, right? We're kind of, it's like forced growth opportunities. And so, um, and but here's the thing with that, right? Like as we really learn and we learn from each one of these things, and the next time we are able to stay regulated instead of going down the rabbit hole, instead of sliding into our emotional reactivity to whatever's going on around us, that is really what the world is trying to show us right now, right? It's like, can I, here's the real test. Can I open my Facebook? Can I open my TikTok? Can I open my Instagram and not get swept into the emotional story that's there? Can I stay in the center of my nervous system, in the center of myself, and then hold space for the real pain that humanity is going through right now on all sides, on all angles? Um, and then take action, right? I'm not saying we don't take action, but it's we get aligned first. And if we can't fix something by being an emotional mess, we have to be centered, and then we can act. And that's what this is saying. And the more we do that, the more resilient we become. And what resiliency really is at its core is that we are starting to train the emotional system how to stay regulated, the nervous system how to stay centered, which then begins to reprogram the story of the heart center. And the heart center is now attracting a different story altogether. That's why we say once we really kind of manage to grow in our emotional resiliency, it's not that life gets easier, it's our ability to handle life gets better. And then what we start to attract is a different thing, right? So if we don't need to learn the lesson, let's say, about money anymore, then we stop attracting things that highlight our poverty consciousness. Or if we don't need to learn a certain lesson in relationship anymore, we attract a different relationship. And so that's really the bigger story of what's going on with these gates that we're going to transit this month. And so it might feel a little crunchy, right? Like we might have some crunch in there about, do I trust in source? Am I ready to let go of the old stories? What is my ability? Where, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is my ability to find that nervous system center, to get myself regulated and not be looking outside myself for something to regulate me? When we look outside ourselves for something, that's going to look like grasping, wanting someone else to make me feel better so I don't feel good. I'm gonna, like, who can I call? Like, dial a friend, like, who can I get on the phone, because I'm feeling unsafe by myself. I'm feeling unsafe in the quiet. We might numb out with Netflix. We might drink it away, and so those are all, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but they're all learning opportunities for us to be like, oh wait, this was about me learning in this moment. Like, oh, look how I did that. I really was feeling very lonely, which is an amplification of my abandonment issues. And I looked externally to regulate that instead of the ability to look internally. Now, I want to talk about the ability to do that, because we cannot always just think our way into emotional regulation, right? We need tools. We need healers. We need therapists. We need all of the modalities, like um, neurofeedback and EMDR, and all of those things help us release the old story out of the cell system, out of the neurology, like it gets us out of those patterns and it rewires it so that we can create a new pattern, because it isn't always as easy as thinking our way to a new pattern. We might need support with that, right? And so that's what applied neurology is in my work. That's what neurocohesion is as a modality. So, okay. I think I've talked at you enough. Look, I haven't been here for like 2 months and I'm like, oh wait, I've got a lot of things to tell you. So yeah, so that's your homework for this month, is to just kind of sit with like, what, like, am I in a place in my life where I'm learning to self-regulate, and am I having a lot of opportunity? And I guarantee you, you are having something in your own world. If you're in midlife, you probably are having lots of opportunities. But if you're not, there is a correlation between out there and in here. And so the world out there, which feels really crazy and really scary right now, and no matter who you voted for, although I think for some people it feels more than others, but it's, I mean, I know that for sure. I didn't mean to put think in front of that, but really all of those are opportunities, right? Everything that's happening is an opportunity for us to go deeper and to find that pocket of self-sustainability, of self-regulation, of our 8 C's, so that we can tackle and we can reimagine the way that we can be humans together. Okay, that's it for this rambling, my pontifications on self-regulation. Until next time, y'all. Thanks for joining me today on Unstuckish. If this conversation sparks something for you, imagine what we could uncover when we look directly at your unique blueprint. That's exactly what we do in my chart chats. They're part chart reading, part psychic session, part soul strategy. Basically, you bring the question, and together we'll call on your design, your guides, and your intuition to get the answers you've been craving. You don't have to keep wandering in the fog, y'all. Book your chart chat and let's find the clarity, direction, and soul deep yes you've been looking for. And if you haven't gotten your copy yet, Unstuck Yourself, Thrive Beyond Burnout, and Find Your True Purpose is now available for pre-order. Get your copy today at unstuckyourselfbook.net. Remember, getting unstuck isn't about perfection. It's about movement, alignment, and finding joy along the way. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and stay a little unstuckish.